That's me too. All right.
Here we go.
Yeah. So welcome to Solid Ground Livestream number 30. Number 30.
Number 30.
It's nice to see you guys. Yep, I know. It's crazy, right? And it's almost August, last day of July. So we're just having a nice chat about how our platform is growing, how what we're doing is growing. So we thank you to everybody who's joining, and we really love the groups and love the member engagement. So it's really valuable. And David, you want to tell people who we are, what Solid Ground is?
Yeah.
The blurb.
So I'll do the blurb. I'm feeling self-conscious because I still haven't got any musical backing or turned into a beat poem yet, but watch this space. So Solid Ground is a peer support community for anyone concerned about the imposition of critical social justice, CSJ, aka woke, and or COVID mandates in their workplace, university, children's school, or community. We offer weekly online peer support groups in which members share ideas, thoughts, and support for how to navigate the impact of these ideologies and answer the question, where do we go from here? You can join one of our groups for only $5 per month. To find out how to join our community, please visit solidgroundsupport.com. And please note, Solid Ground does not provide psychotherapy or legal advice, and nothing we should do should be construed as such. I probably should know that. I should have that memorized by now, shouldn't I, really?
Well, and next time you really should just have like some music that you're ready to press play on so that you can have, a little tune.
No.
So what if you had to say that in your own words? What would you say?
I would say we're a bunch of wacky heretics who have been rejected from wider society and have created our own utopia online. Please come find us. We're not going to get you out of your sticky mess if it's legal or if you're a bit crazy, but we can get you to hopefully open up and explore some ideas. Cheers.
You can check in anytime you like, but you can never leave. No.
I could have Hotel California playing in the background, definitely.
Yeah, that's what you need to do, is just the music only for Hotel California.
Right. I'll
Hi,
work
Jen.
on.
Jen's in the chat. Hello, Jen. Nice to have you here. And so, Deborah, you had this interesting experience this past, was it just this weekend, or was it? Yeah. And you had kind of the cultural debate happen with an individual just in passing, sort of like somebody. So could you explain what happened?
Yes, and I wasn't the one that engaged in it the most. I have a new friend who did. I have permission to tell this tale. We called it In the Wild. I was meeting with somebody from the Unspeakeasy, which is a community for heterodox women, and we were sitting having coffee, talking about all of the things we talk about here. And the topic came up of both psychedelics and psychotherapy, and also she had a friend who had just completed a master's in counseling psychology program who had been appalled with what was happening with that. And we were in like two seats here, and there's a woman behind her the next day, and that woman kind of came into our conversation and was like, what are you talking about? And it turned out that she was a psychiatrist in her residency and was a little interested in psychedelics, but the topic turned to there's indoctrination going on in psychotherapy. And she was like, really? I didn't hear any of that. I didn't see any of that. But then as she proceeded to talk, it was clear that even in the med school program she had, that there were certain things that were coming to that, and she just wasn't even aware of it. So for example, somehow we got on the topic of, well, it's really good that we're, race comes in, there's used to be those 2 scores for your kidney, the EGFR, I forget, on your blood test, and they separated out for African Americans this other one. She goes in, but they're not doing that anymore. She said, we're stopping racializing so many things. And I thought, I mean, this is where it was hard for me, because there were things she was saying that were so untrue or backward. Like I'm thinking, no, we're actually racializing everything in medicine, but the woman I was with, she said I could use her first name, Kelly. Kelly was really much calmer and just was like, well, actually, I don't think that's true. And she would come back with sort of counter information. And I noticed that I like to think I can have these conversations, but I didn't choose to enter it. So I was a little uncomfortable. So I said, I need to go to the bathroom. And by the time I came out, which wasn't that long, they're talking about transing children. I mean, they went from race to transing children like very quickly, apparently. And this woman was just sort of saying all the things like, well, it's hard, if we wait till after puberty, this is going to happen. And Kelly was really good. I mean, Kelly went through everything we would talk about, well, the evidence isn't good. These other countries have been reversing what they're doing. Should we really use something that there's a lot of uncertainty about? But the woman just kind of kept coming back with all of the phrases, like the unconsidered, phrases that we would talk about. And then we also got on the topic of, well, it seems like some therapists are having a harder time counseling people who might have a different point of view than they do politically, that the therapists have a political agenda. And of course, I don't think they're doing that, but she goes, but of course, if I had a client that was saying hateful things, like I might need to do something about that. And as I sort of piped in with that, it's like, well, what is hateful, or what is, happening? So in any event, mostly it was Kelly kind of giving a lot of good counterpoints. And then I sort of noticed that I was just so agitated. And then I found myself, maybe it's a compensation strategy, but it ended up being helpful later, wanting to connect with her on other things. She still kept staying there, though. It was so interesting. I mean, there were so many points that we were basically saying no. And so she had a book. So I said, I love seeing people read books, like a real book. What is it? And she just lit up. She had done creative writing in undergrad. She just, told us like all about this book and how she was in this other book this person had written. And I don't know, like something really changed in terms of the general vibe. And I just kept looking for everything in her that I wanted to see other aspects of her, because I felt like I was putting her in a box, even in my mind, of like, oh my gosh, this person is like a robot repeating all the things. And so I kept kind of working with that. And it was amazing to me. She was with us for an hour at least. I was just surprised. She just kept, and Kelly kept pressing about these things. My friend's program is really terrible. And the woman even said, well, I'll go look that up when I go home. Like, what was the name of the program? The thing is that if she looks at it, she'll probably think it's fine. But in any event, it was both, I felt I wanted to have done a better job of being curious about her points of view. I didn't talk as much. And so I felt a little bit like I failed on that to because I was so agitated. Kelly had more of a strategy of, I'm going to inform her, but she was so calm and she didn't have any apology for stating what she thinks is true. And I'll admit, this woman was that she kept staying. So she wasn't immediately turning it on us like, you guys are terrible that you think that. She never said that at all. So it was, I don't know, it was just a very interesting thing to be thrown into like this culture conversation with a stranger. You didn't, I was thinking a lot about context. Like when they'll get to control kind of the context, and it's a little harder to maneuver around to do what you might do if you chose to have the discussion. And I think the other thing that was interesting too, there were things that she was, fine with the children taking these medications and all of this stuff is rather aggressive treatment. But then she had a whole other point of view about certain forms of therapy or medicating people or doing other things in other realms that she thought these types of treatments were way too aggressive. And I didn't get to the point of saying, I wanted to point out, well, that's interesting that you're very cautious on this front, but it seems like it doesn't apply there. I'm curious how you distinguish these. I didn't get around to asking that. So that's what happened. It just made me wonder about, what do we do if we are thrust into, it's one thing if it's your boss or your workplace, it's another, I don't know, there's a stranger, you're at a party, this comes up, how to have a conversation.
Well, there's a couple things that you said that really that immediately sort of stood out to me. One of them was how you talked about that she kind of, there's this robotic, you kind of joked about it, but that kind of robot, and that I think comes from the repetition of specific phrases and ideas that are so, it's like when Jennifer, when you said the woke zombie mob came after you, and they were like, just like, you know, all in lockstep with their little phrases and stuff. And it seems like some of the things, the way that they say them, there's not really a way to refute it directly because it's not fact-based. And so you can't just offer up some counterpoint. You have to then go into this whole philosophy and this whole, and so that it's difficult to want to even engage with that because you have to rewrite the whole foundation of how somebody came up with that, and how can we rewrite somebody else's foundations? And so it's so hard to even talk with someone who's parroting certain ideas that it is tempting to just walk away from it. In a way, it is tempting to just like, I don't even know.
I was like, I'm going to the bathroom.
Yeah. 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 But
and then, yeah. Oh, sorry.
You also, your impulse to talk with her about other things, I think that's really awesome because it highlights the shared humanity and the fact that we are not just who we are doesn't come down to how we feel about a certain ideology, whether we're in line with it or not.
And she did say, although she might have meant something different than I do, she said, I think it's just so important to give people a space to self-reflect. Like, and I don't know if she thinks self-reflect is thinking about your privilege or so, I don't know, right? But I like that really hit me in this beautiful way. And so several times I just felt moved with my hand and my heart. And I said, God, I'm just loving it when you say that. You feel like part of your job is to help people self-reflect. I was like that's really speaking to me, and I really felt moved by that. So I was like, okay, even though I'm having all this like objection, to her, I was like, okay, that's like, I can really resonate. I just wanted to like acknowledge her. Like, I don't know what that did for her. I'm not sure, but I felt closer.
It's nice that you had that instinct to kind of humanize her because you thought, I'm slowly creating a pigeonhole and firmly inserting a pigeon into it.
I have to admit, it wasn't intentional at first. It was a little bit like I'm anxious and I what's my strategy to make things less stressful, but then later I felt like, oh, I am doing that.
When you said, Deborah, about wanting to be more curious as well, like you wish you could have been more curious, was that so you could build out her ideas? Was that because you wanted to kind of help her to see maybe what her real thoughts were beyond these thought terminating cliches, to kind of help her build these sort of reasoning out for herself as to why she believed them? Was that what your angle was?
That's the thing a person could do. I'm kind of drawing more on like stuff from Braver Angels and other things that I do. I wanted to really just, sometimes I find if you can just get down to the level, I might not agree with any of her reasoning about anything, but like if you can find that someone has some values and like what those are, and that they know that they have some. So if I'd say, so you seem to care about such and such, and you kind of drill down. So is that because of, I don't know, right? Like what motivates, like, do you care? I don't know. I don't know what it would have been, but I could kind of get below the surface of she's advocating people do this stuff down to, oh, I care about people. I don't even know, because it's hard for me sometimes to figure out what people are thinking on this level.
Yeah.
And so I didn't go there. And again, like Kelly was so good at just continuing to unapologetically state her point, and multiple times. I mean, sometimes like I would have been I probably would have said my thing and then kind of hid, right? Like, and she was very relaxed. I was really impressed that she could do it. And I felt like she was trying to hit home too. Like, I think she did things a few times to try to get the woman to admit something, like, which the woman never rejected things outright. It was very, very interesting. And even on history, the woman said, well, we never really learned real history. And Kelly's like, I don't know, maybe I went to a really good school, but we really learned all the stuff that they're talking about now. So that's really interesting because I learned all this stuff. So
interesting. Jennifer, William McCartan says your background is lovely. And I agree. And it actually, as you lean up against it, it looks like you're part of it because the colors you're wearing match.
We're all one.
Is it a little Saraswati? Are you doing a little Saraswati, or I don't know which?
I have multiple arms.
And two heads.
That's right. One of my heads is a dog head, but it's still really my head.
What do you think, Jennifer? What do you think about
I'm
that
thinking,
experience?
I'm very impressed when people can, have these conversations with people who are saying kind of woke things. It's odd for me to say that because I've always been a person who's pretty comfortable having discussions with people who thought completely differently from me. And it wasn't until I had that really aversive experience with the DEI stuff in my workplace that I became a person who wasn't really able to tolerate that. And I think some of that is because it brings up such intense emotion in me because of the suffering I went through and all the massive changes in my life. So it's still very, it still pushes my buttons, but I've been kind of working on just staying present and calm when people are spouting what to me is utter crap. But trying just to be able to be with that. And I think I'm a couple months out from being able to have a conversation with someone who's saying those things. I feel like I could help other people with how they respond, but myself, my emotions around all that are still really high because it just immediately sends me back to my own experience that was so upsetting. So I know that's part of it, and I have to kind of be aware of that.
I think it's hard because I was wondering too, like, why is the stress so high? Like, I could have a disagreement with someone who's red or Republican. That's not been the side I've typically been on. And I feel like we could just have a really interesting I think it's the fear of my own side. Is it going to attack me and damage me? Like that feels just more, even if a Republican did that, I wouldn't feel as bad because I'd be like, well, that's not been my team, whatever. But it's like, oh my gosh, my own people or something are.
Well, there's
coming
something so
after you.
emotionally jarring about having somebody say things that you know aren't true and say them to you as if they are. There's something just so, I think it causes such dissonance to have someone like looking at you and saying, well, the sky is green or something, just like something crazy like the new reframe on race and the whole idea of the trans child and all these things that just, we know that we could have had conversations with anybody 15 years ago, and this is the way that it would have gone. But now there's a whole bunch of people who just believe this stuff and say it with such fervor. And I think that's really, it's incredibly jarring. I think it's, and especially when it's coupled with ostracism, like what happened in your job, Jennifer. I mean, that's going to cause emotional damage. And so it's no wonder that you can't engage without a lot of emotion coming up.
Yeah. And I feel like I have, it's not that I think that nobody has good faith discussions about this, because I do think there's people having good faith discussions, and I'm grateful for that. But how do I know precisely who's having a good faith discussion and who's trying to look for, because there are people who are approaching this that from the perspective of, all white people are racist and I'm just looking for evidence of your racism. And so they're not engaging with you on good faith. They're using the conversation as a way to gather evidence against you. And then how do you know what they're going to do with that evidence, which of course the evidence is distorted, but it's not real evidence because I'm not a white supremacist. But in people's minds where they think everybody's a white supremacist, and it's basically that feeling of anything you say can and will be used against you. and kind of like the queen saying, you know, off with your head. It's that kind of mentality sometimes. And it's the mentality of it that I find so creepy, that kind of authoritarian, punitive mentality. And I think I really have wanted to avoid people with that mentality. And so it's like I need to know that that person's engaging in good faith, and then I can engage. I don't want to just have these type of conversations with anybody. So it's like, aha, there is just another example of a white privileged woman using her privilege to blah, 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 blah. And then, you know, just you're off to crazy town. I really want to avoid crazy town, having had to live there for a little while at my job.
You know, your example, the comparison to the Queen and Alice in Wonderland, that is such a great metaphor for this. It's that whole courtroom scene in that book. I just reread that book recently with my kids, and it's that really resembles this. And when you say that mentality you want to avoid, it's that because I said so, and there's nothing that you can add that will make me think anything, because I've already come to a conclusion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think what helped with us was this woman wasn't trying to convince us, really. I mean, it was so interesting to have her really so curious what we were. I mean, I couldn't believe she hung out there that long. You know, like I thought, does she not have anywhere else to go? You know, like, on the other hand, that she was like a psychiatrist in training. And I was kind of like, and interestingly enough, she was very into maybe wanting to train in psychoanalysis, and really like this notion of the 3 times a week for years model. That to me was in contrast of this, like maybe you go to the gender clinic and they tell you in -1 sessions that you can go on this path. Like, it was interesting that she had this view of not being rushed, and let's do psychoanalysis for millions of years. I don't know. It was just very interesting. And so she wasn't so confrontational. It was more like it just arose that, wow, she has a different point of view. And she doesn't know, I don't think she had in her mind that she was supposed to be being a social activist. So I think she had just finished med school in 2020. And so I'm imagining some things filtered in, but maybe they hadn't told them your job is to be an activist, but there was these little bits of information or something like that. So it wasn't so clear cut to her, like she had some mission like that, but some of the thinking had been seeping in.
A comment I wanted to read here, a guy in his room says, we used to say avoid politics, religion, abortion, but now there are 1,000 more things a day to avoid. It's impossible. And when I read that, and I don't know if this is what you were thinking with that, but I think I kind of see that, but I see it a little bit like of a different, I see, instead of avoiding those topics, we're talking about them constantly. And in this case, it's like someone else gets into your conversation in order to have like the bigger, like social conflict discussion with you, instead, where once we would have had these parameters on polite discussion that would say that only within very intimate, close relationships should we open up and have these deeper philosophical discussions about money, politics, sex, religion, whatever it is, these bigger things. You only discuss those with very personal context. Now everybody puts them, they tweet them on Twitter in like cute little sentences, and then they get into other people's discussions, and they're an activist, and it's their job to ferret this out and have these. And so I don't know, I see it as like a breakdown of polite discussion, and that everything is on the table for discourse.
I do want to say in this woman's defense that I don't think she intended to even have, like, I think she just heard the psychedelic thing and maybe psychotherapy, and was just kind of, oh, like, what are you guys talking about? And then the more she was saying certain types of things, we were going, her little woke alarm went on. And so I don't think she came into trying to get us going on that necessarily. It's more like we detected that.
I love that phrase, woke alarm.
Yeah. I think anybody who's been through something in their workplace or school with this, we all have these. It was woke alarm. It's alert, alert, alert. I definitely have one.
I had an interesting experience not that long ago with some friends. We hired out some accommodation for the weekend because it was a friend's wedding. And this is about the group of about 6 of us, and one of them in particular is really quite woke. And I've started to realize over the last year that some of the other members of the group are less woke and maybe get a little bit impatient with her going on, but would never directly contradict her. And this was like the first night, I think on a Friday, we all got together, had a few drinks. The main wedding was the next night. So we've got 2 days to get on with each other. And before, like 5 minutes in, like some like Prosecco or something and some biscuits, we're talking about trans stuff. And it's like, oh God, it's just like, so not only my woke alarms going off, my sort of like damage control kind of like, let's not get too heavily into this. But something interesting happened, which was that my friend, one of my friends said, and I'm surprised she said it because she's one of the less woke, but she said, this whole trans bathroom thing, she goes, I'm starting to wonder, is the whole thing just generated by like right wingers? Like this whole thing, is it just right wingers getting everyone to fight amongst themselves? Because I don't care. I'm not interested in this bathroom thing. I don't know many women that are upset with trans people coming into the bathroom. It must be like a right-wing conspiracy. And so she sort of looked at me and I thought, no, it's not a right-wing. No, it's definitely not. There's plenty of people that are upset with that. And then a friend of mine who was quite woke really started sort of talking a bit more. And she said a few things and I stayed quiet. And then another friend of mine said, another friend knows my views quite well. She said, David, do you have any views on this? And I thought, okay. so then I sort of stated a few things. I don't know how far, I didn't really go in that much with it, but I just said there's a lot of people with a lot of different opinions. There are a lot of people who are very concerned with the protection of women's spaces and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't say too much more and I kind of kept it fairly light. And then I saw my woke friend look at me and it's almost like she played the ace card. She basically just said, well, I think once you understand oppression, then you can empathize with someone else who's gone through oppression. And she was looking at me, and a bit like what you were saying earlier, Jen, about the whole white woman. Okay, I'm the white woman. She was looking at me. She was like, "You're the white guy. You haven't been through oppression." She and my friend is like half Asian or something like that. I went like this. Okay, I'm out. I go, does anyone else want some more Prosecco or something like that? Because at that point I thought, I'm not going to go any further with this. And we did move the conversation on. And the next night of the wedding, like we were getting on like there was no political differences or there shouldn't be problems with political differences, but we certainly were getting on like a really fun group. And another friend of mine said to me, I really like the fact you didn't take the bait. He said, I really like the fact that you didn't take the bait. You just kind of went, oh, well, I'll leave it there. And for me, that was like quite interesting because I don't think he realized that I've been burning up since that time, thinking, oh, why did I let her get away with that? But actually, I did step away, and my friend said to me, yeah, I'm glad you didn't take the bait. I'm glad we didn't just like erupt and you all start kind of, on the first night. And maybe there just felt like there was a bit of an understanding amongst some of the other people that were there that was the moment. That was the moment to kill it. Like she was now challenging me about my identity. Okay. And actually, maybe at that point, there's a way in which we can sort of start to think to ourselves, if you're gonna do that, then that is the end of our rational conversation in a way. But
right. As soon as somebody's thinking, well, you are this way because you're white, or because you're male, or because you're whatever, then you can't really have a completely kind of truly honest, sort of pure conversation with that person, because in a sense their mind has been made up and they're not really seeing you as a person. They're just seeing a sort of a demographic, and you're becoming a stand-in for something that they view in a particular way. And so anything you say is being looked at through that lens, like, oh, well, I'm speaking to a privileged white person. And that's just that's a very faulty basis for an honest exchange, I think.
Well, it's an ad hominem attack and it's hitting below the belt. And so you've already declared, I'm going to play dirty. So we're not going to talk about ideas on the level of your ideas. We're going to talk about who you are and why I just don't trust you. And so
Right.
somebody's going to start slinging that around in an argument. Well, what can you do but bow out? Because otherwise it's just going to be an ugly conflict. So
Yeah.
sounds like you did the right thing, David. And I think it's funny that she said, David, do you have any thoughts on, or somebody's invited you? I had this this thought of David is dressed as Clark Kent today, because you have no idea. He's just going to rip it open and let you know.
This is reminding me.
No.
Oh, sorry, I keep interrupting.
No, I'm just being a child. Go ahead, Deborah.
No, it's reminding me, and I'm not getting these details right, but like you'll get the gist of it. So I don't know if you saw that Chris Rufo got into this recent thing with Eddie Glaude. I don't know how you pronounce it. Who's a professor at Princeton, and Eddie Glaude is African American, Black, whatever, and basically called Chris Rufo a racist. And I don't know how he said it exactly, but Chris Rufo was like, that basically like, is that all you got? Like, and he got ratioed so bad that like there was sort of like, at this point, Chris was sort of like, that like basically that word doesn't mean anything to me. That's, you don't have anything. And there's a bit of glee going on. I noticed everyone's like, yeah, the tide has turned now that Chris Rufo won't, you know what I mean? Like now all the cards are going to come down, whatever, dominoes are going to fall, which I think is probably a little much, and he doesn't know that person. I don't know if he knows that person personally. It's a little harder when you have someone right in front of you, or it's her friend or anything, but it was like, he's like, I'm not playing. And that's the kind of sort of what you did, David, in a certain
that's
way.
That's kind of what it felt. My initial reaction was to do that, but I felt the whole of the next day I was like, I'm gonna get her back at some point. That competitive part of me that was like, that's been damaged by some of this stuff before, was like, well, I'll fight back. And then to have a friend who, I don't know his views completely, but I know that he's maybe he's quite sympathetic to some woke ideas. He certainly is doesn't like to get involved with stuff. He sort of, he kind of gets quite like, David, are you really saying that stuff in your course? But the fact that he said, I'm glad you didn't take the bait, it just shows that there's a sense in which we are getting to a point where it's like, people recognize that that's not a good argument, but they just kind of step away. So and that's what we've been knowing for a while. Maybe we don't know because we're not the sort of people that step away, but there's a lot of people who've been stepping away for a couple of years now, and maybe they're sort of letting themselves be known a bit more. I don't know. We got a super chat from Asante. Thank you very much. And this Asante asks, how would you guys label yourself politically today if you feel you can and should label yourself? Does anybody want to bite that one?
Politically homeless.
I'd probably say I'm a left-leaning liberal. I thought maybe centrist, but I don't know. Maybe centrist, actually. I actually don't know. Yeah, I have a hard time with that one too. I don't feel represented by anything I really see in the political sphere right now. So I hear that phrase, homeless. It rings a bell. I tend to feel more center, but. Sorry, I was going to say, do you think that's, Leslie, because you don't feel you're aligned to any political party? Or is it also that you're just like, even if I could define myself like on a political compass, I wouldn't know where to put myself? Oh, on the political compass, I could probably place myself. I'd be, okay. I'm center and down towards libertarian. So that probably would be where I put myself on the compass. But if I had to give myself a label, I don't know what that would be right now in terms of what people are labeling things. I really do not like that we have made such a habit of using the word liberal when we mean illiberal leftist. I don't like that. That's something that really irritates me. And I try not to say it. I've probably said it before because I just hear it so much, but I have to catch myself every time because that's not liberal. What's happening on the left? Yeah. Deborah, what about you?
I'd say in that politically homeless thing too. I mean, I was so liberal progressive like my whole life. I noticed there's certain things like I don't know if I'd ever not respond in certain ways because it's something things are wired in, but I've been reviewing everything. Like a lot of things I don't know what I think about them anymore at all, where I had a firm position. So kind of everything's up for review, but I feel like there's some things that I just can't help that I get that bottom left, that left anti-authoritarian square too. So I don't know how much of that'll go away, but I think about everything in kind of new ways.
A guy in his
Yeah.
room says, "You mean politically unhoused, Jennifer?"
I'm experiencing being unhoused. Maybe I could say classic liberal with some conservative instincts. Maybe I could say that, but that's probably the closest I could get to labeling myself.
Mhm.
Have you ever done one of those political compass things or like quizzes that puts you somewhere?
Mhm.
No.
Where do you fall, David, on the compass?
You sort of described somewhere where it's like, I think I'm bang in the middle of that green square. So like, but between, most of the, I don't know, like halfway between the middle and libertarian, should we say? And then like, on the left. So, yeah. I mean, this is it, isn't it? Like we're at a point now where the political spectrum of left right, it's just not got enough dimensions, has it? So we need the authoritarian libertarian dimension to really sort of like build it out in clarity.
Yeah, I think that really helps. A friend of mine introduced me to the concept of the political compass just a few years ago, and it made everything make a lot more sense in terms of describing ideology, because I think that axis is very important.
What's been hard for me is figuring out if I'm more for, say reducing inequality or things like that, but then now I'm also having more mistrust of the state, right? So then I'm like, okay, who helps do that then? If the state, right, like people are just like voluntarily going to go help with inequality. So I'm in a conundrum about, if I don't want a state doing a lot of things and I'm not trusting it so much, like how do some things maybe get done that I might like to see happen if people aren't voluntarily doing them? So I don't know how to solve for that.
I'm going to read a couple of chats here. A. Asante sends another super chat. Thank you very much. And says, fun fact, the left and right spectrum arose out of the French Revolution with the libs going to the left and monarchists going to the right of the room. That's really interesting. And then a guy in his room says, if libertarian means anyone can do anything they want, I'm not that. And also all the libertarian candidates seem goofy. Yeah. So, I don't think that anybody should do anything they want, but what I am opposed to is the state deciding what people can do. I think people should decide among themselves in culture for a lot of things. So I had this so during the COVID crazy lockdown stuff, I was really frustrated with that. I really was disturbed by the state response to COVID and the lockdown stuff. It was incredibly unsettling to me. I ended up losing my job over it. It was for taking the wrong opinion, because I was willing to do the measures that my boss wanted to do in the clinic where I worked. I was willing to do all the things that she asked. I just didn't agree. And it was the discussion about whether I agreed or not about wearing a mask alone in the clinic. I wrong-thinked and I got fired for that. So it was a job that I had for 6 years. Anyway, I felt very strongly about how disturbed I was by this. And here in the middle of all that, one day I was sitting eating lunch on my lunch break outside of a grocery store. It's like kind of upscale health food grocery place that had this really pretty plaza outside. And I'm sitting there just having my lunch by myself. And there's a sign that says, don't tie dogs here. Don't leave your dog unattended here. And a lady right underneath of that sign tying her dog up. And I actually took a picture of it because it was like so meme worthy, because there's a sign that tells you don't leave your dogs unattended. There's a fine of like $500 if you do this. And a woman actually tying her dog right beneath this and then going into the store to go shopping. And I had this moment where I had this, how dare she, kind of like welling up in me, like, oh, somebody, you're breaking the rule. It was like this desire to see her told not to do that thing. And then it was this realization, I'm doing that thing. I'm wanting the the authority figure to come tell the other kid not to do the thing that the kid is doing wrong in the class that I've been told not to do, and how's she getting away with that? It was this like very petty impulse to control someone else's behavior because I see them breaking a rule.
Because you were treated that way yourself. Like,
well, maybe,
maybe.
but it was, to me, it was like, this is where this problem comes from. This is the same. I'm part of the problem if I have a rule enforcement attitude toward other people. Like, why am I worried about this? It's not hurting me. I just see a rule being broken and I have an impulse to go and get the person in trouble. What is that? Anyway, that's not very well articulated, but I don't know if it comes from me being told to do that. I don't think so, because I was I would like that with the masks and stuff. I didn't wear a mask a single time. I just went everywhere I wanted to go, and I didn't care if there was a rule. So I'm not like a rule following person necessarily, but here I still had that impulse. And
I think it's in all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's in all of us. It just depends on what kind of triggers that part of us. It's like, teacher, Mary did this. Like we all have some of that in us. It's just to different extents. I think on that political compass test, there were a lot, I scored pretty highly libertarian, actually. And some of that, I think, is just because I really do basically believe live and let live. But I wouldn't say that I'm totally libertarian, because I also have the belief that people will do what they can get away with. And so for the purposes of protecting people, like protecting employers, for example, from horrible exploitation, and protecting employees from horrible exploitation from their employers, I think we need laws to protect employees. And I don't think the free market just solves everything. So I can't really say I'm libertarian, because I just don't have that faith that the free market will solve things, or at least not quickly enough before some people's lives are ruined, or they have the experience of really being exploited. But then in a lot of ways, I do feel like, just, as long as people aren't infringing on your rights, let them do what they're doing.
I think that's a really good point. I think and I don't know how to answer this question for myself philosophically. I just don't know. William Paquet says, because rules are often important for order. And I totally agree with that. I think we do need rules. It's just about enforcement. What's the enforcement measure? And I don't know where, I'm still trying to work this out in my own mind, and I don't know if I'll ever have an answer, because it feels there's so much nuance necessary. But I am concerned about how much we are asking the state to control our lives, down to the nitty gritty. And so I kind of wonder if maybe it doesn't come down to an issue of centralization. And the greater the centralization of power, the less responsive the power structure is to the needs of the actual people who are being governed. And so I guess that's, if I have to say, things that I'm wary of politically, I'm really wary of centralization. And I feel like having power decentralized and in the hands of smaller and smaller governing bodies is actually much healthier for the lives of citizens. That's kind of where I lean.
Wouldn't you say too, like the farther, imagine the bureaucrat or whoever's, I don't know, enforcing, like the farther removed they are, the more likely they're being arbitrary anyway, right? There's just something about that distance between them and the actual situation, that there's more likely people to go to that either checklist, or, you know what I mean? Like just not really having nuance, just like the machine going along. So I think people's behaviors, I think there's probably systems that could be set up that are going to either foster more like nuance and understanding and a refined sensitivity, and ones that will foster more of let's tell in the teacher. Let's tell the teacher, right? And I don't know what you could design that would make it, or just who you put in place in those positions, right? If there's people that are more mature or something, that would likely lead it to not just be, petty, I'm going to tell on them, kind of vibe to it.
So like a high control versus high trust concept.
Yeah, possibly, or just even, again, if like people are administering their jobs and everything is, just even when you see how DEI and stuff, like a lot of this is administered, it's kind of like no one's contextualizing it all, and it's just like I have the 5, I've got to get these, I get my incentive because these 5 boxes are checked, and like there's not anything like, how is this impacting somebody? Like there's not much the self-reflection. We can go back to our the woman yesterday we were speaking with, like I don't know how either you choose people who are capable of that, or you don't make the process so rote and so insensitive to the circumstance. It's probably, that's why it's easier if it's probably local, right? Like there's some probably greater interest in responding to a situation in front of you, your neighbors, you know what I mean? Or like people in your town. People may care more about the subtle details of something instead of getting, I don't know, again, just being like little rubber stamper people or something, tattle people.
It's so confused, isn't it? It reminds me of a conversation I had with my personal tutor when we were talking about some of the ideas on the course that have been challenged, that I've challenged. And he was sort of saying, you seem to sort of be somebody who prizes individualism a lot, David. And I thought, well, yeah, I don't know if I prize it a lot. I just realized that it's not really being considered at all in these stupid collective, like this collective idea is incoherent. It's got so many contradictions. And it also reminded me of like listening to a Spike podcast recently where I think it was Francis Foster was talking about like how a governing board in I think inner city London was kind of congratulating itself for appointing it was a majority Muslim school board, and then they were celebrating that about a year ago that they'd done that, and then when Pride Month happened, they were surprised to realize that the board weren't very supportive of what some of the school were planning on doing for Pride Month. And this is just an incoherency, isn't it? It's like you're not doing anything to explain how collectivist individualist ideas can be, all the nuance and sensitivity of creating this structure. You're just kind of going, we should do this, DEI, tick box, and then afterwards kind of going, oh, it's a mess.
Yeah, it's interesting. I went to a wedding years ago, and the vows, at first I thought I had a strong reaction to the woman's vows had something to do with, I promise to take care of myself and to always, and she was talking about like taking care of her health and her body and her mind and just and I thought, wow, shouldn't you have said something about taking care of the marriage or of him and what your promise is to him? And I had a really strong reaction to it. But after a while, I thought, okay, there's some wisdom in this, because she's saying, I'm going to continue to work on being the best person that I can be, so that I bring the best person into this relationship, so that you have a partner who really cares about being strong and healthy and sound for the purposes of this relationship. And it's not the vows I would write, but I could see kind of where there was some wisdom in it. And I think that that's the kind of the society that enables people to be themselves the best way that they can, and each be strong. And that's the kind of the idea of individualism for the collective. In a way. I don't know, that's a fragmented thought, but just throwing that out there.
Did the guy have similar vows, Leslie, about taking care of himself?
I don't remember. I don't think so.
Let it
That's
all
why
hang
it
out.
stood out. Yeah.
Well, so one could look at this through the lens of self-development for the good of the marriage, or one could look at it through the lens of it's all a euphemism for I'm going to try to keep myself really hot looking to be a desirable penis receptacle, which being the cynic that I am, I think that there's some of that in there.
Possibly the latter.
Because otherwise, I think if the guy had talked about his own self-care and his own self-development, then I would say yes, because that is what you try to do in a good marriage, because you're always sacrificing to and giving to the marriage. because that's what you're building together. But when it's just the woman, I think, oh, these things are sort of euphemisms for, I'll stay, I'm going to start getting Botox and I'm going to keep a firm ass.
This was not she wasn't a high maintenance, like real pretty girl kind of girl. She was a little more like a businesswoman and a real like ambitious kind of person. And so my take on it was that the first way it struck my ear was that it was self-serving and it was kind of arrogant and me, but not in that exact way. But then point taken. So I don't know. I had a less than generous initial reflection on hearing that vow, and later on I tried to hear it a different way. But it's definitely been one of the most memorable things I've heard at a wedding. Interesting. Well, thank you for a good discussion on woke alarms going off in the wild. and all the good stuff and thank you to Asante for bringing up the political stuff, because I don't usually think about political labeling like that, but it is definitely very interesting to examine what that means to each of us, especially in today's.
Yeah, can I just say something as well? Sorry to interrupt. Something you were saying earlier, Deborah, in your explanation of your conversation, which I found interesting, was the fact that the lady that was speaking to you and Kelly couldn't really conceive of the idea of people having different political ideas. And then she said, but there could be someone who had a really offensive political idea. And it's almost as if she could only understand politics in terms of offensive and then the status quo. And it's like, oh, my computer's just locked. Anyway, but I think it feels like we want to encourage people to just be able to have different positions, have different values and beliefs, and acknowledge that that's a framework rather than the status quo and then everyone else, the dissidents. So my computer locked just as I was mid-flow in that, and I lost what I was saying.
No, that's a really good thing to highlight. Yeah. Well, thanks again, everybody. And we'll let Jen go to her group, and thanks for being in the chat. You